Imagine that your mind is an iceberg. What you see above the surface, your conscious thoughts, the decision you make every day, the person you believe yourselves to be, is only a tiny tip. Everything truly important, everything that actually drives you, lies deep beneath the surface in dark and freezing oceans of the subconscious. Welcome to the world of the man who forever changed the way we look at ourselves, the men who claim that we are not even masters in our own house. Today we are talking about the psychology of the father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud. When you think of psychotherapy today, you probably imagine a patient lying on a couch talking about childhood, while some bearded man with glasses takes notes. Well, that couch and that entire concept came from Freud. Before him, if you had psychological problems, doctors often treated you physically, locking people in dark rooms, using electric shocks, or plunging them into ice cold water. Freud arrived with a revolutionary and for that era almost absurd idea. What if we simply talk to these people? What if words themselves could heal? Freud believed that human psyche consists of three constantly warring forces battling inside our minds. He called them id, the ego, and the superego. The first is the id or ID. This is your inner primitive caveman. The id wants everything and it wants it now. It operates entirely on the pleasure principle. When you are hungry, the id wants the greasiest burger possible. When you see someone attractive, the id wants action without thinking about consequences. The id knows nothing about morality, loves, or logic. On the opposite side stands the superego. This is your inner police officer, the moral compass shaped by parents and society. The superego is filled with rules, guilt, and impossible ideas. It constantly it constantly whispers things like you cannot do that. It is shameful. What do people think? You must be perfect. And trapped between those two forces in the poor ego, that is essentially your conscious self. The ego acts like a referee in a boxing ring, trying to calm down both the wild beasts, the ID, and the strict professor, the superego. If the id says, buy those expensive shoes even though you cannot afford rent, while the superego says, work harder and save every penny, the ego must somehow negotiate a compromise. When the ego begins losing that battle, anxiety appears in order to protect himself from psychological collapse. The ego activates what Freud called defense mechanisms. One of the most famous is repression. When something deeply traumatic happens to you, or when you experience thoughts your superego considers acceptable. The ego locks those thoughts deep inside the basement of the subconscious. But here is the problem. Those thoughts do not die there. They remain alive in the dark and eventually emerge when you least expect it throughout anxiety, panic attacks, dreams, or what we now call a Freudian sleep. When you accidentally say what you subconsciously truly think. And of course, it would be impossible to talk about Freud without mentioning the subjects he loves discussing most sex and childhood. Freud shocked conservative Vienna by claiming that our character is largely formed during the first years of life, and that children pass throughout psychosexual stages of development. He argued that if trauma or excessive indulgence occurs during one of those stages, a person can become psychologically fixated. According to Freud, adults who compulsively bite their nails, smoke excessively, or talk non-stop may carry unsolved fixation from the earliest oral stage of childhood. Then there is the famous Oedipus complex, perhaps his most controversial theory, which claims that young boys subconsciously feel attraction toward their mothers while viewing their fathers as rivals. Does that sound bizarre and extreme? Most modern psychologists would probably agree with you. And that brings us to the central question. Was Freud right? Modern science has rejected a large portion of his theories because many of them cannot be scientifically tested or verified. But here is the important part. Regardless of how strange some of his ideas about sexuality and fixation may sound today, Freud gave humanity something incredibly valuable. He opened the door of the subconscious mind. He showed us that human beings are not always rational creatures, fully in control of every action. More often than not, we are driven by hidden motives, childhood wounds, and fears we do not even want to admit to ourselves. Freud taught us to dig deeper. So, what do you think about Freud? Was he a genius who exposed the hidden structure of the human soul, or simply an eccentric man obsessed with strange theories about the mind?